I very adamantly believe that every business should have some aspect of a projection of where revenue is headed and what we've actually secured over the course of the next 90 days. And is there a gap? Is there not? And what are the implications of what does that actually look like? So the reality is that if we're going to end up in a revenue plateau, I should have known that 6 to 8 months ago. And that means that my pipeline has been lower than normal, lower than average. It hasn't been hitting my expectations there. It also means that I haven't been converting as much. That means I haven't been presenting as many proposals. That means all of these pieces. So those metrics that are going on within sales and marketing or in accounts is giving me an indication that is actually coming up. Everyone, so I want to walk through a little bit of a scenario. So you're growing and things are really moving, and then all of a sudden they're not. So that's the revenue plateau. And I mean, frankly, most agencies will eventually at some point hit some kind of revenue plateau. And the mistake most owners make when this is happening is they overreact. They start pivoting their services, they start rewriting offers, they start changing anything to create something new so that they can feel that motion again. But true sustainable growth isn't about panic. It's about being more precise and having meaningful precision. So in this episode, Darren and I are going to dig into the real causes of revenue stalls and how to spot it in the actual hidden blockers that are going on in your agency so that you're able to define them and move past them, whether you know it now or it is something that is coming. And this is a roadmap for being able to break through these moments with confidence.
I guess some questions that people will want to know is really how common is the revenue plateau and why does it seem to catch everybody off guard, right?
I don't know that I have like a statistic that can say exactly how often it actually happens across agencies. The reality is I see revenue plateaus predominantly being a factor of two different things. One, the industry that you're serving is in a pivotal moment in its own trajectory, or you are not doing the activity that's necessary in order for you to be able to grow past that revenue plateau. And the reality is that for every organization, large or small, whether you're a single person agency or you've got a team of 75, the reality is that you have to have meaningful activities in order for you to be able to have revenue and demand generating activities, whether that's existing relationships or new relationships. And you have to be continually doing those things. And the moment that they start to fall off is when it creates for that problem.
Okay. And so it's either, just making sure I understand this correctly or so they understand this correctly. So it's either just like a industry-wide kind of thing that's happening, whether like the market is going to move up or down. So it's not something that you can control per se. And another one is something that you can control, which is like your level of activity, right? And so I guess a question would then be, right, so is it just the fact that I need to do, or as an agency owner, would they need to do more activity to get over that plateau, right? So let's say like I have been all of these years, I've been doing 100 outreaches, and I've consistently grown, 5% a year. And this year I do my 100 outreaches and I don't grow that 5% a year. Does that mean I need to go to 2, 3, right? Is that what you're saying in terms of like the things that you're doing that will?
I don't know that I can be that prescriptive, but I want to hit something that I think is important within kind of one of the things that you're saying is like, what is the actual kind of growth problem in it. But the reality is that if you're in a place where you have been doing 100 activities and it's not actually having meaningful impact, there's a couple of different scenarios that can be at play. One is, what is your industry's seasonality? So what is the seasonality of the work that you're ultimately doing? So here's an example, right? Is that anyone that is heavily focused in working with larger businesses, enterprise, as an example, you're typically going to have meaningful sales seasonality that's going to happen right at the end of the year. So a lot of activity, but a lot of signed SOWs happening right in January, or a lot of signed SOWs right at the end of the year because their fiscal year is coming to an end. You're also going to see that happen a lot right in the middle of the year. So a lot of sales activity happening in April and May, and then a lot of signed SOWs that happen in June, July. And the reality is that's because the fiscal year is coming to an end and Treasury's now unlocked those fiscal budgets. And that's going to be true too when you look at the industry that you're serving. So as an example, let's say that you work with flowers, because flowers and chocolate is sold really meaningfully around Valentine's Day. You're talking about having an implication of what's going on immediately before that, right? So if you're talking CPG, you're talking that you're working within consumer goods, you have a lot of items being sold during Black Friday and that kind of timeline. You have a lot of sales that are happening during Memorial Day and President's Day. And so it's like, how exactly does the industry that you serve have impact to the actual activity and output that's going on. So first identify whether it's actually a growth problem or not. Are you just
Hmm.
feeling like you're not getting as much activity in the short term, but look at it in a longer scale? And then two, if it is a bona fide, hey, I've been doing this for the last year and it hasn't had the impact, then we need to look at what has changed within the activity that we've done and who it is that we're reaching out to. So there's a couple of implications there. One could be that you've reached enough market saturation that you do need to make some augmented choice, or the channel has changed, that there's not as much engagement and activity there. And so the reality is that you have to analyze the data that then is going to inform that kind of piece.
Okay, so you're saying that sometimes there are things that may feel like it's a growth problem, but it actually isn't a growth problem. It's just maybe something that is outside of your hands. Is there anything else, or like, what do you, in your experience, what feels like growth problem for agency owners, but actually isn't
I want
a
to hit
problem?
something. So something out of your hands. I don't know. I believe in something being entirely out of my hands. I do think
Hmm.
that there's, macroeconomic factors that I'm not in control of. But that doesn't mean that there isn't something that I can do to mitigate those challenges that are happening. There always is option in what you're doing and the activity that you're taking to be able to manage and create opportunity and optionality in your life. Now, how do you define whether it's actually a problem or not? The reality is you need to take a moment to understand what are the factors that are at play and what items are actually informing and actually creating for the scenario that you have. And
Hmm.
so what I think is really important is whenever you're in a place where it feels like you're not actually hitting the objectives of what you're wanting to do. There's two things. There's an overreaction that ends up taking place because you're
Hmm.
nervous, and whenever someone's anxious, right? So you have flight, fight, freeze. And so you have someone that either is going to just run away and not do anything. They're going to have a problem and they're going to ignore it. You have someone that's going to fight, which is the anxiety response and just doing everything they possibly can do, or they just completely stop and are shut down entirely, which is the same response as the running away. So the thing that I want you to make sure that you're doing is, one, allowing for yourself to like have that emotional response and then start to get to the analysis of it, of what is actually going on within the business that allows for you to understand the true root of the problem. Once you have a true root of the problem, then you can start to diagnose exactly what's going on. But the reality is when that ends up happening too, so now you have a defined what the actual problem is. It's macroeconomic problem. You have a shift in the channel that you've been utilizing, and they've made an algorithmic change that is now impacting the way that it's actually functioning for you, or your domain authority is changed, or your email's blacklisted, or whatever, right? Like there's loads of different things that could have happened. Also, mind you, we're all talking specifically new business, and there's 80% of your business should be existing business. So there's loads of activities that should be going on there too as well. And if you're not having that, then we need to look at delivery and how clients feel and the way that we're engaging with them and the relationships that we're building and gifting strategies and all sorts of things, and how we're making sure that they understand delivery to business objectives. But the reality of one of the things that I see happen is that let's say that I've defined the problem as I have a lead generation issue and I can see that the numbers aren't having its impact. And then I end up changing 5 things at once. And so I either
Hmm.
do one of two things. One, I've changed 5 things and none of it worked. Well, which one is actually truly the issue? What thing should I be focusing my attention on? And you need to be intentional, meaningful in like the hypothesis that you're making. So changing one thing at a time. What is the timeline in order for me to test that this functioned or did the thing that I wanted it to? And what is the output going to be? So what does it look like? What is the hypothesis? What is the reason why? And then what is the timeline I'm going to allow that effective change to actually come to fruition before I make another change?
Okay. All right. So what I'm hearing is, one, don't panic, do everything, right? And then, because if you panic, do everything and something may work, then you don't know which thing worked, probably, right?
Yep.
And so you just kind of created another problem for yourself.
Yep.
So I guess that also the second thing was, you said, was that making sure that you, I guess, diagnose the problem, and how you do that is like, just one, you have like your own initial hypothesis, right? So the scientific method basically is like, come up with your own hypothesis, then you test it, and then that's something that you can work on and fix. Is that something that you just typically do with your clients? And like, is there a specific way that you do that, or is it just like a kind of okay, I feel a little bit more,
Well,
maybe we should try this, maybe we should try that?
so I mean, I think there's all of the above to a certain degree, right? And I don't know about,
Hmm.
I like the idea that I'm licking my finger, checking to see which way the wind's blowing, but it's more informed than that, at least how I'm looking at myself in the mirror. The reality of it, like as a baseline level, is looking at things from an input output perspective, right? So we are looking at the output, revenues not growing or
Mhm.
revenues even down. And so now I'm looking at what are all the different components. So the first question is this a new logo problem or is this an existing business problem? So, okay, so now I know it's an existing business problem or it's a new business problem. Now that I know that, now I'm looking at where have I typically gotten business from. So in new business, as an example, you're likely getting some from active demand gen activities. You're also probably getting some that are via referrals. Maybe you're getting some that is more that you're going to conferences. So where do the leads actually come from and where's the gap of what took place to what is now happening today? So, okay, so now I know that the gap is happening within this specific channel. Now that I know it's within this specific channel. So you're just going like piece by piece down the line to understand, right? So here's the output. And then what are the things that break into it within each number? There's 10, 15, 20, maybe even 100 different activities or things that built up to that number, the revenue number specifically, right? And now that you have a clean understanding of what is implicating it, then you can start to look at what are the factors that are associated with it. And so let's say as an example, right, that we're working in an industry that right now is suffering, like, or at least a segment of the industry is suffering. So now that we know that, it may not be that we are changing. So like, here's some of the implications that I see happen quite a lot is that we assume now that the industry that we are serving is not the right one, so that we just end up massively changing our specialization or who it is that we are targeting. And we're just like kind of willy-nilly shooting in the dark. And let's say that the industry, like one specific division or segment of the industry that we serve is not having as much growth. And so that's what we have, and we have been heavily concentrated there. But there's another growing segment of the industry, and we need to just slightly augment the way that we are talking about ourselves or focusing on who we're reaching out to that allows for us to then have that uptake and then capitalize on the growth segment of the market. The reality in every economy, whether you are in a recession or not, there are people growing in a recession as well as people that are shrinking. And so where's the opportunity within the market and then appropriately responding to that? I mean, largely, and again, for every person listening, if you're new, this is a new piece of information, but everyone else that's been listening for a long time, like everything to me is a number. And what is the number that is actually informing the decision or the direction that I need to go? From there, the piece that why when Darren did his licking his finger and testing where the air was going, there is a little bit of that, right? Because part of that is I read probably far too much, both news and books, and the news component is going to inform a little bit of what Darren was describing and what like ended up resonating when he was talking about it. Because like part of it is watching where the wind is actually going economically and what's going on even potentially politically, because that affects economics. And so what is going on there that allows for us to adjust and then maybe not be impacted by those passing winds as much.
Okay. So instead of people, because a lot of things that we kind of prescribed were reactive, right? After you see your revenue is stopped, then, maybe go pull a couple of levers here, pull a couple of levers there. Is there warning signs or things that they can look out for that where I can not even have that plateau or, lessen the impact or catch it early? You know what I'm saying? Is there something that they can look at, do to avoid that?
Yes, absolutely. So I very adamantly believe that every business should have some aspect of a projection of where revenue is headed and what we've actually secured over the course of the next 90 days. And is there a gap? Is there not? And what are the implications of what does that actually look like? So the reality is that if we're going to end up in a revenue plateau, I should have known that 6 to 8 months ago. And that means that my pipeline has been lower than normal, lower than average. It hasn't been hitting my expectations there. It also means that I haven't been converting as much. That means I haven't been presenting as many proposals. That means all of these pieces. So those metrics that are going on within sales and marketing or in accounts is giving me an indication that is actually coming up. So the early warning signs is what should my average pipeline value be? What should my pipeline value be during this time of the year because of seasonality? And is it low? Is it high? What is the normal deal size? So how many more deals? Are they smaller than they used to be? What's kind of going on? So what is my average deal value? And then what is my conversion rate, both on new business as well as existing business? And what is the distinction between them? That gives you a very clear understanding of, I see this plateau coming and I can actually start to manage it before it starts to impact business making day-to-day decisions.
Interesting. I think one thing that I, in my experience, have found incredibly frustrating for agency owners is that they have a strong pipeline. They're selling, they're getting new business, but I can't get over that hump. Like it's just like new business is coming in. I'm doing well on the selling component, but my revenue is still where I'm at. And I feel like I may be doing better at sales, but like that's like, is there anything that would cause, even though I'm doing well and I feel like I'm selling everything, my conversion rate is high. What would be the cause of something that?
Well, okay. So let me play this out for a second. Where my mind was going was one way, but the way that you ended up describing it, if I have a good pipeline and I'm continuing to convert well, and I'm not just holding on to deals that are fictitiously being held on to that are not close lost, that I'm leaving them in there for long periods of time for no reason at all, then, and I have a reasonable amount of existing business conversion, then you shouldn't be in a plateau. You should likely be growing. If you have a higher pipeline value, you're converting at the same rate, and your existing business conversion rate continues to be the same, and you're continuing to retain as much of the business, then you're not in a plateau. Now, one of the things I see incredibly often is over optimism when it comes to sales pipelines. And so you'll have people that will generate proposals for people that they never should have generated them before for in the first place, that didn't have the money, or we couldn't actually solve the challenge. So we had very little likelihood that we were going to win this deal in the first place, but we wanted to put it in because we didn't feel like we had the activity that we wanted. So we ended up doing this so that we could lie to ourselves so that we feel more comfortable about it. Or we end up not wanting to mark something complete when we've been completely ghosted, and or the person has said, oh, we're not going to be making a decision until 2095, and fine, mark it, gone. It's gone. Set up a task to remind you to talk to them in 2095 and not bring it up and not have it in your pipeline that you're talking about every single week, and then you have it as part of your pipeline today. One of the things that I have, at least for ones that have like meaningful CRMs, any one-on-one client that we have as a metric is any deals that are beyond their average timeline. So that actually gets prioritized from a revenue perspective. It actually lowers the forecast rate and the probability rate once it goes past a certain timeline. And if it's past, and one of the things that you should have as a metric is like, what is the date that we haven't closed and gotten a closed one yes deal in this timeline? And so let's say that it's 75 days. After 75 days, that deal's just gone. It's gone. Market closed. Set up a task to remind you later, like you could potentially reactivate that deal. But if you're leaving it open so that you feel better about it, frankly, looking at wax food on your table is not going to satiate yourself. It's just going to make you frustrated because it looks tasty and you don't have any food to eat.
What about the clients that are already my clients? Like, what about the fact that like I may be able to bring in the new business, but I also have new business going out the door, right? So what is a revenue plateau caused by like churn actually look like on the surface?
So there's two primary components that I see, and it depends on the services the agency's offering. There's normal cadences, right, with any piece of business. What is your revenue retention, and then what is your logo retention? So looking at churn from a logo retention as well as what is your net revenue. So you can both be growing accounts, and your revenue is actually growing while you have a shrinking number of logos, meaning your revenue is growing on average by each account. And so you need to be looking at a couple of things. There's also cadences by which you have a typical lifetime value with a client. So maybe your lifetime value is 18 months or it's 3 years, and it's just a normal cadence. And so one of the things that I've seen happen that can be problematic is you may have growth meaningfully because you've sold, and your average lifetime value of a client, let's call it 18 months. And so for an 18-month period of time, you haven't been selling new business, but you've been retaining the old business, and you're continuing to upsell those and upsell them into larger scopes of work and continuing to do more business. So theoretically, your revenue is growing, but you have a heavy concentration or even 95% of existing business that has a timeline of attrition. Like there is going to be some aspect of normal attrition, and you have to plan for that and understand what those cadences are. So there always needs to be a reasonable weight between both existing business and new business. And the reality, in my view, is that most of your business, 70-80%, should be coming from existing relationships. And you should be in the 20 to 30% that is new logos that you're retaining, that is going to allow for you to have opportunity to sell and grow those accounts into the future as well. Now, this is obviously barring a massive asterisk for any agency that is very project heavy and is a one and done shop. And if you are that shop, you want to make sure that it is a pragmatic choice that you made that, and that you're not just letting people go out the door and you have abilities to be able to sell them and you're just not meaningfully capturing them.
One thing that I also often see in this space is, I want to say like this mindset that like if I'm not, well, and I kind of agree to a certain extent, where it's like, if I'm not growing, I'm dying, or like, you know, but there's like a dogmatic, like scale or die kind of narrative in this space. Like what I want to say, I guess, how do you help agency owners that you work with kind of have the right mindset when it comes to growing and kind of break out of the kind of toxic mindset of like, this is a
scale or die. I mean, yeah, that's a bit of the like Martell and Hormozy effect of the internet right now, right? Like it's creating this idea that if I'm not just 3xing, 4xing, like, that I'm doing a bad thing and I'm a failure at life and you feel shit about yourself. But it also creates the wrong dynamic, frankly, for a lot of people, that I would much prefer to have sustainable growth year over year at, even if it's 5, 10, 20% growth year over year, that has a meaningful compounding impact than to have a 2-year time frame where I grew 100% and then all of a sudden off the cliff. The reality of what happens, and I'll explain a little bit through a story. New client in 2023, she meaningfully wanted to grow top line revenue. And I understood why, because the same idea, it's like, I want to grow revenue because I want to grow profit. And she adamantly disagreed with me in that I wanted to solve for the pricing problem first, operational challenges first. She's completely disinterested in operational things and these like little number oriented components, Excel spreadsheets and all the stuff, like has zero interest in it. The thing that she cares about is the thing that excites her, and that's sales and winning deals and getting the dopamine hit. But the reality is that she was at a 9 to 11% on average from a net profit perspective. And not growing, was doing reasonably well. And the first year that we worked together, there was several moments where I ended up questioning myself because she was so frustrated by the idea that we were not growing hand over fist, this like scale or die mentality. And I fundamentally do not believe in the vanity metrics of top line revenue. The thing that actually really matters is how much do you get to keep at the end of the day. And that's really how most agencies are also evaluated too, is a multiple of EBIT. And what we ended up doing was actually growing her agency's bottom line. Top line nominally, she still grew like 4 or 5%, but profit went from 11% the year prior to 35, 38%. And then the following year in 2025 went to 43%, which is huge. So it had gone from a $4 million agency to a $9 million agency, but from 11% to 43%. And the amount of impact there did end up growing substantially the following year and then focused our attention somewhere else. But now that we had the resources, we can invest properly. We had a lot of optionality. We had a lot of space, that it created a very different impact. And this idea of scale or die ends up creating the wrong decision. You're focusing entirely on revenue growth rather than on the thing that really matters, is operational prowess, profitability, pragmatism in the day-to-day decisions that you're making. So I'm very much adamant around the idea of sustainable growth rather than this idea of, the traditional scaling model that I'm going from $1 million to 30 million in the span of a couple of years. And if that's the model that you want and that's what you want to do, like go for it. I'm not here to tell you that you shouldn't. That's just not something that I think works as well. And hopefully you're the unicorn.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I like taking more money home. So I definitely would agree that, revenue is not always the measurement of success, right? Okay. And well, I like actionable things, right? So what is, I guess, one high leverage move an agency owner can do today, this week, to move themselves out of that plateau or out of a plateau?
What is the one activity that has the most highest impact? So if I look at and take a moment to slow down, but looking at the activity of where you're generating your revenue from, what is the time that I spent to generate that revenue? And let me focus more attention there, assuming that there's some ability to be able to increase the amount of output or activity there, spend more time there. What I see happen quite a lot is people are just constantly shifting through different tactics, moving from one tactic to another. Look at what you've done historically. How much time did it actually take to achieve that result? Now invest more time or dollars directly in that specific piece. As like a wrap here, the growth stalling isn't failure. It's feedback on your activity and the decisions that you've made. The key is to not panic, not to pivot too fast. You do and may need to pivot, and choose to not chase the noise over the signals, which signals are going to be metrics. When you slow down enough to diagnose the real blocker, you can apply pressure exactly where it matters and where momentum is going to be able to build. So if you're feeling stuck, this is your reminder. Sustainable growth is possible, but only when you stop guessing and start making your decisions more strategically. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening in today. With all of the shifts in the industry, it is easy to feel overwhelmed or unsure of your next move. So I'm not here to try to sell you anything. I just want to give back and guide you through the uncertainty. Whether you're navigating new trends or just need some clarity, we're here to listen and offer advice. Head to creativeagencysuccess.com/chat to book a free 15-minute chat with an agency mentor who can provide you with a fresh perspective. Let's figure out the best steps for your agency's growth together.